Abbiamo iniziato.
We started this year's meeting last Sunday with a dramatic testimony from Nigeria. And throughout the past week, the topic of religious freedom has been a leitmotif throughout the meeting, from round tables and in the documentaries we've seen, and in many meetings with the many visitors to the meeting from all over the world. Today, this afternoon's meeting is designed to tackle this major topic from the standpoint of international politics. Religious freedom, as we know, is a fundamental right of man for many cultures, and from many views of man, we can say that this right is the foremost of all human rights and underlies the fundamental rights of man. So we feel the need for this right to be reconfirmed and defended in all situations and in all settings and all conditions. But there is another perspective, because it's not enough to defend religious freedom, we need to build it. And we need to find the viewpoint of building parts of the world based on religious freedom, which have at their center, at their heart, the topic of religious freedom, a new way of relations among peoples and among states. Religious freedom as not only a right to defend, and we know how necessary this is in the current age, even though we thought that conflicts over religious freedom were over. Instead, history, again, as always, proposes conflict and dramatic situations which need to be solved. So the defense of religious freedom is indeed a leading topic of international politics, but just as important, if we want to safeguard religious freedom, is the topic of building relations in the world in which religious freedom is the foundation, mutual respect, religious freedom, the rights of communities underlies a way of being related among peoples and persons. We are extremely honored today to have with us these illustrious speakers, and I would like you to greet the speakers, to meet the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, who is here for the first time, His Excellency Nassir Abdulaziz Al-Nasser. I must say that for us, for the first time, we are able to welcome such an important figure from the order of the contemporary world. We have here Minister Giulio Terzi, di Sant Agata, Italian Minister for Foreign Affairs. And for him too, he is also a new entry to our meeting, a new friend for the Rimini meeting, and we hope that he will have occasion to return. I don't mean to indicate that you will be in a new government next year, but it would be a pleasure for us to have an ongoing relationship with you. Then I would like to introduce Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran, a well-known face for many of us. And we would like to thank him for his attention and esteem for the meeting. and so much so that he was willing to interrupt his holiday, and he's a very busy man, so we're particularly grateful for the fact that he is today. He is president of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue and was many years the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Holy See in a particularly significant period of John Paul II's papacy. To listen to our speakers today, I would like to invite another friendly face of the meeting, the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of San Marino, Antonella Mularoni, to say a few words to open the meeting. Antonella Mularoni is a symbol of political freedom, but also a good friend of the meeting and continues to support us, as she has done for many years. Thank you, Minister. Mrs. President, authorities and friends of the meeting, it is a pleasure for me to be at the meeting this year again and to bring my greetings as Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of San Marino in the spirit of a strong friendship and positive collaboration that has been consolidated over time. The Meeting for Friendship Amongst Peoples has found in San Marino a partner that has followed with great interest the birth and growth of this event. It could be said that it couldn't be otherwise, given the fact that the meeting follows and fosters dialogue among peoples, cultures and religions. It enhances freedom of thought and the promotion of rights and fundamental freedoms, acting in synthesis for the same values on which the Republic of San Marino laid its foundations from the outset of its history and characterizes its presence at international level. The topic proposed this year is also very dear to San Marino. I remember that during the second presidency of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe in 2007, at the end of a regional international conference on intercultural and interreligious dialogue, to which representatives of the three main monotheist religions participated, a document was issued committing the 47 member countries of the Council of Europe to an annual meeting on this topic. The meeting has now become a consolidated tradition that the Council of Europe continues to promote as a turnkey for the construction of a world in which there is a place for everyone, with respect of all religions and hence all people, irrespective of their professed or non-professed beliefs. In other international organizations of which it is part, the San Marino has always been in support of understanding the reasons of others, as well as the defense of the rights and fundamental liberties of individuals and peoples, including the primary role of religious freedom. I would also like to emphasize here that the Republic of San Marino has always been proud of its Christian roots that have given rise to the Republic and historically have created a community different from those in the Italian peninsula. Its strong identity is also expressed in the many institutional moments, but this does not prevent it from respecting different beliefs of those who intend to live their lives according to, and those of their families according to different beliefs. For San Marino and its population, respecting religious freedom does not mean concealing the signs of religious belief shared by the majority of citizens, which is one of the characteristic elements of the country and its culture and is entrenched in its population. But it means respecting anyone who lives in San Marino, irrespective of their beliefs. Today, international politics increasingly finds itself tackling tensions and problems to do with religious freedom. And where conflict is not resolved, as we see this on a daily basis, the effects are devastating, with repercussions on all the other countries. Politics, first and foremost, at national level, must be able to blend religious sentiment of the majority of its people with deep respect and convicted respect for those who belong to other faiths and who must feel free enough to profess their faiths even though they live in a country where their religious belonging is not prevalent. For politics, this is not an easy task, but it is our duty if we want to count on responsible communities expressing solidarity and in which everyone plays an active role, aware that they live in a country where their religious sentiment or their lack of religious sentiment are respected. And let us never forget to emphasize that the European political class is bound to follow this goal also under the European Convention of Rights and Fundamental Freedoms that constrains all countries under the Council of Europe. So it is not a question of privileging one option rather than another, but simply of attaining our goal. There cannot be respect for religious freedom without the desire to be open and know other faiths. There cannot be awareness and conscience of awareness without of the difference, without dialogue and a sincere intention to understand and respect others. This applies to individuals and to communities alike, and also to the clergy. And this must also apply to all those who are subject to the jurisdiction of a state, even when their faith, professed or not professed, by the other members of the state. History, including recent history, shows that the inability of politics to manage the communal living of different faiths in its area or in the relations with the state is a problem for humanity at large and has drawn peoples into long-lasting wars with tens and thousands of victims, often innocent victims, who have not managed to offer a better future. In addition, these situations lead to the creation of thousands of refugees and emigrants who are looking for a better future for themselves and for their families in other countries, often generating enormous difficulties for these people who often travel in desperate conditions with the risk of losing their lives or being subject to inhuman treatment, and a whole series of tensions within the states where they land, because it is not always easy to manage the cohabitation of people of different cultures, especially in an emergency, in a situation of economic difficulty or the impossibility of planning immigration policies. Today, the ability to manage these aspects and to solve the many problems that have for a long time in wars that are more or less known have been forgotten and have now become an absolute priority for the international community. History, in fact, shows that these conflicts do not solve themselves. They are only solved if there is a strong political will to implement concrete actions for all the parties at play. And not always has strong political will been apparent or not always coherent. Only the capacity to implement this will make the international community credible for all peoples and ensure peace and development in regions of the world that are entitled after such suffering to reach these goals. San Marino is a country perfectly aware of its size and its limitations, but it will continue on the strength of its history and the values that justified its existence and have fostered the development over the centuries to encourage within international organizations to which it belongs the respect for the freedom and rights of all, including religious freedom and the right to profess one's religious belief or not profess any religious belief. We are convinced that this is also the duty for a country which is not known in past centuries devastating conflicts, and that by virtue of this fact has experienced the great advantages of peace, which has also allowed its citizens, in particular in the last 50 years, to improve its conditions of education and lifestyle, to be able to create a family, relying on the reasonable certainty of offering a dignified future to its children, and to live in a situation of tranquility compared with many people much less lucky. Dear President, I am honored to renew to the meeting the welcome of the San Marino people, certain that this edition of the meeting will be as successful as the meetings of the past. Thank you very much.
Il Presidente
Mr. President Al-Nasser, comes from Qatar and has been President of the United Nations General Assembly since 2011 and previously was a permanent ambassador to the United Nations. So he has a great deal of experience in the field of diplomacy and international politics. I would like you to welcome Abdulaziz Al-Nasser and ask him to take the floor, ensuring that the presence of the President of the United Nations General Assembly is symbolic, and we are honored to have him here with us, showing that the efforts of the dramatic struggle of states and people who are making to build a more peaceful and better world. I would also like to thank our Minister for Foreign Affairs for his commitment and the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, and because we are grateful to our ministry for the fact that Abnu Al-Nasser could be here today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here in Rimini, one of the most beautiful parts of Italy, and to attend this important event. I wish to thank the organizer for their kind invitation to speak at this panel on international politics and religious freedom. In Rimini, every year, thousands of people from different parts of the world, with different religions, ethnicities, culture, background, professions, come together. Every August, this city becomes a place for friendship. For 33 years, this forum has proven that diversity can create synergy and a strength that we need to overcome our common challenges and to establish a harmony among us. Religious freedom, interfaith dialogue, and mutual understanding are very close to my heart. During my tenure as a permanent representative of the state of Qatar, I carried forth the strategic policy of my country at the UN, in Doha and elsewhere, convening many interfaith and diversity-related forums. As the President of the General Assembly, enhancing intercultural dialogue is an area I am focused during my mandate. Therefore, I will tackle these issues through the UN perspectives. Today, it is unfortunate that in some part of the world, we witness growing intolerance, xenophobia, and incitement to hatred. In some societies, culture is perceived as a source of division instead of a path to dialogue and human solidarity. Let me give you some sad examples. Lately, in some regions, minorities are subject to atrocities or mass killings because they belong to different religions. Holy books are burned, religious symbols are defamed. This is not a society we want to live in. We should protect the diversity in our societies. We have entered a world in which this issue will continue to unsettle us and share unless we realize the benefit of diversity and share the fruits of globalization and just and harmonious way between all members of the human family. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations was built on the premise that dialogue is the best path to peace, that cultural diversity, freedom of thought, and knowing each other enhances respect and tolerance. Hence, the United Nations recognize that international community consists of different faiths and religions. The General Assembly always expressed its special concern over hatred and religious intolerance, and it took several initiatives to fight these scourges. I invite you to take a look at the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, at the 1965 International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discriminations, as well as the many other relevant human rights conventions and instruments but in place since 1948. The General Assembly, through its Human Rights Council, has endlessly introduced human rights resolutions prohibiting discrimination on grounds of religion, race, xenophobia, and of related international intolerance. Multi-ethnic, multi-faith, multilingual, and multicultural societies are to be viewed as source of wealth for all humanity. Unlike last year's session of the General Assembly, where the theme of religion took a more prominent role because of the growing number of religion-focused initiatives, the surprise during this year's third committee session was the human rights representatives' decision not to table the pluralizing defamation of religion resolution. I hope that member states agree soon on tabling this resolution again. Instead, as done during the March 2011 session of the Human Rights Council, the human rights representatives introduced a resolution combating intolerance, negative stereotype, incitation of discrimination, incitement to violence and violence against person, base, religion, or belief. This resolution was adopted with consensus and by an increased number of co-sponsors. Delegations hailed the historic and landmark consensus as well as positive atmosphere which prevailed during these consultations. We should also recognize the wisdom of member states. When realizing this need, they established the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. given the important contribution of dialogue for peace and development. The alliance was established at a time when the grave tensions rooted in cultural differences gripped our world. This new institution emerged as a new hope for the international community to stem the tide of intolerance and offer a perspective of hope and fraternity. It is encouraging that today the group of friends of the Alliance of Civilizations has reached more than 107 countries. In addition to other partners, I am hopeful that in the future, the membership of the group will be universal. The Alliance of Civilization has contributed through its various activities to a clear shift in the way we look at diversity. Following the Madrid, Istanbul, Rio de Janeiro and fourth forum of the Alliance was held last December in my hometown, Doha. It focused on the interconnection between diversity and development. It is obvious that without harmony among different groups in a society, it is not possible to reach prosperity and sustainable economic development. Now, we are looking forward to the next forum that will be hosted by Austria next year in Vienna, which I am confident that will substantially contribute to the issues we are discussing. The Alliance has a role in the world where different religions need not divide us, but unite us and serve as a bridge for a more peaceful and tolerant human family. As part of my support and commitment to these issues, I have organized since December 2011 meetings and other activities to set the stage at the UN for in-depth discussions. My office worked in close partnership with representatives of civil society organizations, including the Committee of Religious NGOs at the UN, to organize a groundbreaking event in honor of the World Interfaith Harmony Week in February. Speakers from a wide range of nationalities and religious traditions, side by side with United Nations officials, missions, agencies, and NGOs, demonstrated our shared commitment to finding common ground for the common good. They highlighted inspiring efforts among people of different faiths in the area of the mediation, conflict, disaster prevention and response, sustainable development, and revitalization of the United Nations. In addition, the spirit of this special event was enhanced by uplifting music, the voice of children, and beautiful ceremony with the people of different faith, waitering a single three representing our common ground. On 22nd of March, I convened a one-day thematic debate at the General Assembly in partnership with the Alliance of Civilizations. There was a general understanding among the participants that politicians, academia, and media have a key role to play in every society participants appreciated the involved contribution of the Alliance of Civilizations. The depth laid particular emphasis on the contribution of the youth. Youth leaders attending from different parts of the world expressed the challenges they are facing in their own societies on freedom of religion and tolerance, and came up with the useful suggestions based on their experiences. It was noted at the meeting that there is still a long way for most of us to recognize the reality of different culture, religions, and political identities, and not to allow them to be an obstacle to reaching out to one another. Humankind must build bridges that are strong enough to carry the weight of our difference. That process requires a sense of common history and perspective. Everyone must accept that others have a story to tell, and everyone should make the effort to listen to that story as part of the general narrative. Here, I will quote the philosopher Kant said, "Live and let live." At the meeting, we also considered the impact of new information and communication technologies on our societies. I do not need to remind you. You all know how today social media are certainly playing a positive role in bringing us together. However, they also serve as a tool dividing us through spreading hatred. At the high-level meeting of the General Assembly on Mediation, organized on 23rd of May, also at my initiative, we considered the role of the Alliance as a complementary tool for mediating disputes arising particularly from religious and cultural difference. During my term, I wanted to set an example for the vision I believe in. Therefore, I attended several events related to interfaith, where we discussed cross-cultural dialogues as crucial components for building peace, tolerance, harmony, and mutual understanding around the world. I attended the Holocaust Remembrance service at the New York Synagogue on 21st of January. I gave a lecture at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies on 1st of March. I had an audience with His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI at the Vatican on 15th of June. Before my term ends, in mid-next month, I plan to organize some other events to further promote these issues. First, before the adoption of the General Assembly resolution on mediation on 13th of September, I will be screening highlights of documentary entitled Beyond Right and Wrong. The theme of this film is forgiveness. The documentary presents Thank you. Thank you. The documentary presents three conflicts from three separate regions of the globe. The 1984 Brighton Hotel bombing on Northern Ireland. The conflict between Palestinians and Israelis, and Rwandan genocide. Forgiveness makes mediation possible, and without mediation, there is no progress. Then, on 14th of September, a special forum will be convened at the General Assembly on culture of peace. We will build on the annual General Assembly resolutions on this matter and discuss thoroughly with the key speakers how to establish a genuine culture of peace. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, let me sincerely thank once again the organizers for giving me this unique opportunity to be with a distinguished politician, intellectual, youth, religious leaders, and civil society representative, and to join this panel discussions. In Rimini, my commitment to the nation of living together side by side, accepting and respecting others as they are, and focusing more on the common values rather than the differences has strengthened. After listening to other participants, although my term as the President of the United Nations General Assembly will come to an end next month, I will continue to work to foster interfaith dialogue, mutual understanding, and religious freedom with the same spirit and determinations. I remind myself, and I remind you, all that our different religions can be invested to enhance our peace and security in our one and common world. And I thank you for listening. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, for having given us an overview of your commitment and your personal commitment to religious freedom. And I can say that we have the well-grounded hope that next year, at next year's meeting, we can present the documentary that you just mentioned, the documentary describing these situations of conflict. So we have already launched a bridge towards next year's edition. And now I would like the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Italian Minister, Giulio Terzi, Sant Agata. Minister is making religious freedom one of his major commitments and is dedicating much energy to this topic. And we would like to thank the Minister, who from the 17th of December 2011 has been Minister. I will not go through all his diplomatic roles when he was Italian ambassador in Israel, and the period in which he was the permanent representative for Italy at the United Nations, and then his appointment as Italian ambassador to the United States. So Giulio Terzi is someone who has far-reaching experience, and we know that he is dedicating much effort to this topic. And thank you, Minister, for being here today. Thank you, Director Fontolan, for your introduction and for having saved my audience a long history of international relations and having concentrated my main experience in your kind words. I would also like to thank the President of the Rimini meeting for allowing me the opportunity to tackle a topic which for me is not only a matter of commitment, as Fontolan said, but also a key topic for government efforts and a topic which is something that we are extremely interested in: international politics and religious freedom. But to tackle this topic here has particular significance, but coming to the meeting for friendship amongst peoples, the relationship, man and his relationship with the infinite. And what has struck me is the energy of so many young people and so many of the faithful, and this is voluntary work with a capital V, of people committed to the fundamental values of the individual in concrete actions to improve the lives of all of us and the society around us. So thank you all very much for allowing me to speak today with a great friend of mine, the President of the United Nations General Assembly, President Nassir Abdulaziz Al-Nasser, who has been extremely modest in talking about the important role he has played in the offices he has held in the Parliament of Man and the Parliament of World, that is the United Nations, the organ of the United Nations, which is the expression of democracy. Not all the bodies of the United Nations are that, but the General Assembly is, and I am grateful for what he has had to say on the topic of religious freedom. And the keen attention I will also pay to the words of Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran, who I've also had occasion to speak to about the impulse of the Holy See and the world of the Church, and especially the Holy See, has dedicated to this topic. And my friend, the San Marino Secretary of State, Antonella Mularoni, and the Italian ambassador to San Marino, who I also greet. The government of which I am a part has been faced with the transformations in the southern countries of the Mediterranean. There has been an extraordinary desire for freedom in that part of the world, which has given rise to the revolutions of the Arab Spring, revolutions still dramatically underway in Syria, and still settling down institutionally in other countries, in Egypt, Libya, and Tunisia. What is happening in our neighboring countries has given me the chance to discuss today what the Catholic partisan Primo Mazzolari rightly defined as the air of religion. The air of religion is freedom. There can be no environment and no climate in which religion and thought can be manifest only in a climate of liberty. And in doing this, I would like to emphasize the concrete reasons why the southern coast of the Mediterranean is a priority in economic, political, and cultural terms for Italy. And here I would just like to digress by saying that our economy, our growth, employment, and the future of our young people in a culturally and economically open society, all these things make our friendship and our relations with the societies of the southern Mediterranean a priority. Italy is among European countries is perceived by the new Arab leadership as an essential point of reference, and I think the representative of Qatar is in agreement with this. If in the last 5 years the economic crisis, which was generated by a more general international crisis, if this crisis has been in part balanced by the internationalization of our businesses faced with a very weak domestic market, this is because the Mediterranean region has been at the forefront of growth. I would like to draw your attention to figures that I would define as the Great Mediterranean area, the geopolitical area that goes from Tunisia to Morocco, Turkey, as far as entering into the 6 countries of the Gulf. In all this area, our exports grew in 2011 by 19% with respect to 2010. Overall trade was equal to 82 billion euro and increased by 4%. More than 3,300 Italian businesses are present in this area, and 15% of foreigners resident and working in Italy come from Northern Africa and the Middle East. Now, in the difficult phase that Italy and Europe is going through, strengthening relations with the new leaders in the Mediterranean is a fundamental element for our economic growth. And from their governments, I must say that I have received appreciation and ongoing appreciation for the economic policy of the current government. I have had guarantees of the support that these countries plan to give to enterprises working in their countries, and also their intention to increase investments in Italy. So in this complex macro-regional situation, Italy is assuming, and this definition is not mine, it is that of our interlocutors, the role of a protagonist. Italy is not only present in political terms and in economic and cultural terms, but above all for its ability to flank this with a strong propensity to dialogue, even on controversial topics, which are nonetheless essential for the stability of the new democracies and for the well-being of societies currently in transformation, and societies which are composed mainly of the young and very young people, like you. Before continuing, I would symbolically like to ask one of you in the audience by showing you a film of some interviews that I took this morning with participants at the meeting.
Informare riguardo a questo fatto, perché spesso quando si parla di
Muslims and Christians fighting, when we talk about martyrs, I think we're talking about the Middle Ages. It's difficult to imagine it existing today. We need to be able to circulate on the internet and by mass means of communication these facts. We must not abandon the Christian presence in Muslim countries. I think we also need to carry forward a discourse of reciprocity and the welcome that we want to have for foreigners who come to Italy. I think we need to expect a welcome in other countries. I think we also want Christian churches to be able to build in Northern Africa. Without integration, there is no respect for other countries. I don't think it's so much the role of ministers, but each person has their own conscience. We need to have a military action against terrorists. I think that a war is the worst solution. I don't think wars will solve anything. Trying to define peace, I don't think we can set off to war, but we can institute dialogue. I think we need relations between and among peoples. I think we need to take action against countries which are guilty of these crimes. I think we need to persuade the world that Christian culture is a culture able to build relations. Yes, with conscience, but we need to have relations with these people on a topic of the defense of the human race. I think we need to move toward that. What those people want is the same as what I want, and that is to be happy.
Grazie.
Thank you. These were very short shots which captured beauty and the signs of moving along a path of dialogue and respect, the need to overcome problems politically without violence, with understanding, with tolerance. And I think this is summing up in a few seconds what emerges from and the ironic aspects. What point is there in going to war? Wars, someone said, are based on corrupt situations and generate yet another war. So political solutions are what people are looking for. So going back to the path of Europe, I would like to recall a phrase pronounced by the British Foreign Minister when the First World War broke out. Sir Edward Grey said a very serious phrase: "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our time." I'm certain that this vision is not acceptable, but I think other visions that are melancholic in Europe come from a sad idea that in a global situation, the European Union continues to be a point of reference for the progress of universal values. Europe has a growing attraction and impulse to affirm rights and fundamental liberties, a strength in which Italy gives vigor to ideas and initiatives of excellence. The European Union is experiencing a difficult economic phase, and it is in search for its identity. But we cannot forget that in its chromosome of liberty, De Gasperi, Adenauer and Schuman guided it towards a community of identity values even before it was an economic community. The European community has been able to relight its lamps from the Rome Treaty onwards, the lamps of liberty and prosperity. These are the lights that have lit for decades the lives of millions of European citizens, overcoming the shadows of the Berlin Wall and totalitarian ideologies. With the enlargement of the Union, the peoples of Eastern Europe have chosen with enthusiasm to feed the freedoms of Europe. Unlike the prophecy of Sir Grey, Europe has come back to influence the definition of global equilibria. I have no hesitation in claiming that the distinctive feature of foreign policy and safety in Europe is that of the fundamental rights of man and man's values. This must remain the barycenter for Italy and for the entire continent. And this barycenter must not be changed, because were it changed, we would risk finding us on a slope that had been lowered downwards towards desolate conformism and compromises of a misunderstood and often cynical realism. And in this way we would betray the fundamental original part of our identity. Global challenges require new energy in the lights of rights to reach the highest objectives. Europe, which has been reunified in a great space of freedom, Europe that has been endowed with a currency, Europe whose principles and laws embrace ethical values, as President Monti said, which were often absent in the policies of the nation-states. This Europe, according to Italy, can and must do more for fundamental rights in safeguarding and promoting the freedom of religion. There are those who claim that in the past Europe had forgotten God. I don't want to reopen this debate, but in international politics the topic of religion has been for too long marginalized or even excluded.
affrontare in pubblico tematiche connesse con le sensibilità religiose.
Tackling in public topics to do with religious sensitivities was considered politically incorrect, even imprudent for a diplomat. For centuries, it was tacitly accepted, the principle enshrined in the Peace of Augsburg, 1555, quis regio eus religio. We cannot be amazed if the state decided the beliefs of its citizens. The politologist Richard Greco noted that in the history of diplomacy, Henry Kissinger did not even include the term religion in the index of his book, and the freedom of religion was not even part of the topics of debate in international relations. It was only in recent years, after Samuel Huntington elaborated the concept of the clash of civilizations, that we started to pay more attention to religion as one of the dynamics of international politics. More recently, among other authoritative voices raising their voices in defense of religion were, for example, the American Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, in her book The Mighty and the Almighty, went into depth on the role of religion in defining the American approach to foreign policy. Italy has newly posed in recent months the topic of religion and religious freedom at the center of international debate. It has done it convinced that the spirit of freedom cannot be fragmented into principal freedoms and secondary freedoms. The spirit of freedom is like a dry wall. It is built with blocks that are arranged in such a way that they stay up without using binding agents. If you remove just one block, one single fundamental freedom, then the whole construction will fall apart. This is the concept that we find in some African traditions. The word Ubuntu describes the concept of network, a social network. If only even one knot is open, then the whole network falls apart, and for this reason, each person must take on the problems that are apparently far away from themselves. And in this way, individual freedom is omnicomprehensive and embraces religion. To deny or arbitrarily restrict this freedom is to foster a reductive vision of the human person, said Pope Benedict XVI. And there is another reason that has led us to promote the safeguard of freedom of religion, an operative reason. Violations of fundamental freedoms provoke conflicts and generate mass exodus. The preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says and acknowledges what comes afterwards, not just in the preamble. It says it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. 60 years before the Arab Spring and the tragedy in Syria, the experience in Afghanistan, Somalia and the Arab Spring indicate that when the fundamental rights of man are negated, they inevitably give rise to rebellion and instability. So there is no contradiction between a safeguard of natural interests and the defense of rights in countries that are far off. On the contrary, taking on the knots in the network apparently distant from us is a major part of our national interest. Again, in Africa, even if it is the cradle of civilization, we have another example. On the 25th of September 2011, after a long illness, Wangari Maathai died in a hospital in Nairobi. This Nobel Prize winner will continue to recall the man for his tireless commitment for the recognition of human and civil rights among the most humble populations, and in particular the rights of women. In one of his last interviews, Wangari Maathai recalled an ancient African story that talks of King Lion escaping from the forest in flames with all the other beasts. And at a certain point he sees a tiny hummingbird flying against the current towards the fire. And the king lion shouts, "What do you think you're doing with your useless flight?" And the hummingbird replies, "I am trying to put out the fire." The lion then makes fun of him and says, "With one drop of water in your beak." And the hummingbird said, carrying on flying, "I will do my part." An increasingly interdependent world taking on the burden of others, their specificities and their rights is a global moral duty. It is not with building walls that we resolve the problem of interethnic conflict, international terrorism or violence on women or abuse of children. They are problems that concern Italy here and now because they are parts of a society which apparently belongs to others, but of people who live beside us every day in our jobs and go to school with our children. Opening dialogue with other people is a principle acknowledged by all universal religions, and here Europe must be a proud standard bearer in the world. This principle is taken from the original European and Italian identity. It is an aspect that drives our identity, and my personal and everyone in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in every institutional meeting, in particular meeting with new leaders in the Arab Spring countries. As I emphasized, in the name of Italy, we have pursued the need to establish a clear constitutional framework for pluralism, construed also as freedom of religion and minority groups. We have also started to work in civil society, including the creation in Rome of an observatory on the freedom of religion. I also insisted in Brussels for this line to be present in the external action of the Union. We have worked in recent years to set up a European task force with specific expiries, asking for the High Representative to draw up a report on religious freedom in the world. And we have also supported the insertion in the European Union guidelines of the freedom of religion with a specific mention. At the same time, we are also trying to increase funding for educational programs in Europe aimed at tolerance and dialogue. This is extremely important and a key part of our programs, not only for the government but also the daily commitment of non-governmental organizations and voluntary workers who in their associations are working in a very difficult setting. The aspect of education to tolerance. In negotiating the financial instruments of the Union for 2014-2020, we are also focusing on these programs. We are ready to help our neighbors generously and countries most in need, but we need to incentivize the countries most committed to the construction of democratic societies. Europe must also act at multilateral level. The General Assembly of the United Nations adopted in December a resolution proposed by the Union on freedom of religion. We must also recall the duty of each state to maximum vigilance to prevent and punish discriminations and violence towards religious minorities. The same occurred last March in the Council of Human Rights in Geneva. The images are still alive in our minds of the atrocities carried out in Nigeria by the Boko Haram group. Massacres perpetrated against Christians in holy places, against the faithful when in prayer. And if we widen our gaze, we see other reasons for concern in Africa, the Middle East and Asia. Do you desire to profess a religion? Do you want to be free to choose not to profess any religion? Do you want to convert to a different belief? All these are fundamental rights that we take for granted in our country, but we need for all of them to be able to answer yes. The exercise of these rights may even put lives at risk. Hundreds of thousands of Christians who have been living for centuries in the Middle East are now forced to emigrate. In an exodus, they are vital components of these societies, which are then made more vulnerable to extremism because of the key component abandoning those countries. In other countries, the freedom of belief or believing or not believing is limited without resorting to violence. Even though they are not discriminated by the law, many minorities live in a climate of hostility tolerated by the local authorities. Freedom of religion cannot simply be a formal acknowledgement by the state. This would be too simple, too easy to write laws which are then not respected or applied by society. So there is a positive obligation, an obligation to be vigilant by all governments to overcome prejudice and intolerance. We need to do more. The heart of the question lies at a level of profound respect for international relations which need to be flanked. Diplomatic action needs to be flanked by international cooperation. It is not enough for individuals are considered free to make their own decisions if the society is despotic or hostile to the exercise of freedoms. Statistics tell us, for example, in the Balkans, but also in areas of the Middle East, for example, around Bethlehem and the Indian subcontinent, the greater or lesser willingness of governments to guarantee a clear framework for the safeguard of rights and social hostility that matures among the population are strictly interconnected. So the attitude of governments and attitudes of the population are interlinked. It is necessary to support the freedom of the individual in society with incisive projects of training and education. We know the great potential of civil society. All remember the work of John Paul II, who as a bishop and then as Archbishop of Cracovia, with patient perseverance, managed to build a new church in the Polish town of Nowa Huta. This success was not easy. It took almost 20 years of effort by the man who was to become Pope. The communist regime refused to grant permission, but that great Pope managed to aggregate much of public opinion and in the end authorized the building of a church which arrived in the end. A highly symbolic operation which clearly indicated the road ahead, never ceased to act coherently with what we believe in. As Don Giussani said, a true education is an education of criticism. From violence, we need to circulate a critical conscience against any form of intolerance. Democracy will dry up without a cultural life open to dialogue. Freedom only exists while discussion and criticism is possible. In this connection, I would like to emphasize the importance of the relation between society and the new technologies. The exceptional work done by you with the web and social networks. These tools can offer us a valuable aid, as we have seen in the societies of the larger Mediterranean, to promote a new critical conscience, especially among the new generations. They are tools even more essential in countries in which real places for dialogue are limited. The web zeroes distances and makes the problem of few or a minority group a universal question. And also for this reason, Italy was among the promoters of the resolution recently approved by the Council of Human Rights of the United Nations in Geneva on the protection of the freedom of expression in Internet. We shall be vigilant so that each individual will be accorded the right to search, receive and communicate information freely on the Internet without censure or interference. Also because on the Internet the young generations will constitute their own transnational model of culture and citizenship. In the last century, there was someone who was illuded that humanity was predestined to a future of freedom. And then, as Roberto remarked, it happened that faced with camps of slavery and extermination, it was written that work sets you free. This century has known the most terrible horrors. Reality is complex and full of obstacles and does not allow prophecy. I am convinced that if Europe, sustained by the action of Italy and the enthusiasm of our young people and civil society that I have seen here today, if they will manage to confirm an authentic leadership in the defense of human rights and religious freedom, in defending any belief, even beliefs that are remote from our personal sensitivity, then we will be able to deliver to future generations a more peaceful and tolerant world, a world on which the light of the European beacon of freedom will continue to shine with greater intensity and to which each of us is called to contribute. Thank you very much for this warm welcome.
Grazie, signor Ministro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for this very fascinating project. And thank you very much for proposing again some pictures of Pope John Paul II. And he had been here 20 years ago at the meeting in Rimini. Now the floor to His Eminence Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran, who is the President of the Pontiff Council for Interfaith Dialogue, which is indeed a great role. He has been the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Holy Site at the times of John Paul II. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation to come at the meeting. Well, I'm always very glad to come to the meeting, even though I have to interrupt my holidays. When people tell me that young people are no longer attending the churches, I always refer to the young people of Rimini. One may wonder how comes that today we hear much about the issue of freedom of religion. One might answer because this is the fundamental right which is more often violated, and the main victims are the Christians. Le Monde, the French newspaper, spoke about the destiny of a young Pakistani woman who went in prison because of blasphemy. We should not forget that in the past century, 45 million Christians died because of their faith. And this is the first and the foremost human rights. And indeed, religious authorities and governments are vigilant, ready to adopt the necessary measures so that religious freedom in its individual and collective dimension is protected today and in the future. And I would like to pay tribute to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Italy for being so sensitive on this issue. Till 1945, human rights were dealt with individual countries. At that time, the action of third states would have been considered very severe interference. But because of the atrocities of the Second World War, reaction was there with more commitment to defend the dignity and the freedom of human beings. So the protection of human rights moved from internal domestic law of countries to the domain of international law. In 1944, to guarantee the freedom of expression, the International Labour Office was set up in Geneva, and then the United Nations, which December the 10th, 1948, passed the Declaration on Human Rights. So the idea of religious freedom entered international law with Article 18 of the Declaration, stating that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. And this right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship and observance of rites. This is Article 18. As you know, the expression freedom of religion was coined by Tertullian at the beginning of the 3rd century after Christ. But don't be scared, I'm not going to tell you the history of this expression. I'm also sure that many of you know the key books. For example, Al-Nasser, President Al-Nasser reminded us of many of these. So when reading these books, we can better understand the meaning of freedom of religion, even though there is no precise definition of the term religion in such international documents. We might say that in terms of international law, freedom of religion implies having the right of having one religion or belief, not to have one, to change it or to give up to it, or the ban to discriminate based on religion and belief. The freedom to manifest one's religion or belief individually or in a community, in public and in private. The freedom to practice a cult, the possibility to limit the manifestations of religion if these limits are envisaged by the law and are necessary to guarantee public order, public security, public health or public morale. The ban to resort to religious hatred, which is an incitement to discrimination, hostility or violence. The freedom to set up or maintain places where to practice a cult. The freedom to write, print, or the ban of any constriction on any person who might be an attack to his or her freedom. Recently, it has been stressed that the freedom of thought, conscience and religion implies a special attention to the people who belong to religious minorities. These people have the right to practice their own culture and their own religion, to use their language in private or in public, and the states are there to protect the existence and the identity of religious minorities, to favor the adequate conditions for that identity. And this, I think, well summarizes the doctrine in force. Indeed, we know there is still a great gap between theory and practice. Indeed, if we look to the past 50 years, a major progress was made in the protection of religious freedom, in particular in those countries which have been dominated by communism for many years. But the lay nature of the state in the Western democracies allowed religious communities to make their voice heard and attract the public attention on some cases of discrimination or persecution. But the situation is far from being satisfactory. In some countries where the majority of people practice the Muslim religion or Hinduism, and also in secularized societies where religious freedom is conceived as an insignificant personal option. I would like to remind you of the position of the Roman Catholic Church as far as the freedom of religion is concerned, as contained in the Dignitatis Humani Declaration. Pope John the 23rd, in the encyclical letter Pacem in Terris, introduced this formula. Among man's right is that of being able to worship God in accordance with the right dictates of his own conscience and to profess his religion both in private and in public. Before the Council, the Popes Leon XIII and Pius XII stated the right to tolerate non-Catholic cults with a view to the common good, to avoid a worse evil. The Fathers of the Council completed that doctrine, putting the human being at the center. So if we take the Declaration Dignitatis Humanae, we'll see that the first part applies to human reason. The right to religious freedom is based on the dignity of the human being as made known by the Word of God. The nature of man is that to search truth, in particular as far as God is concerned. So the freedom of religion cannot be separated from the human being. In the second part of this declaration, it is clear that the right to religious freedom is not a right allowing to decide anything in the field of religion. It is not a right to make mistakes. It is recognized to the person the right to have a space where one can make his choices freely. And also the issue of community is highlighted. Autonomy of religious communities who have their own right of communities to form, to appoint their ministers, right to educate their own members or to freely meet, possibility for parents to educate their children according to their convictions. Then the state is mentioned. Public power cannot impose, cannot prevent choice of a religion. They cannot destroy religion. They should proclaim religious freedom as a civil right and guarantee that that right is exerted. That's why they can limit the exercise of freedom of religion in the event the rights of others are violated or the public health or public morale are threatened. What is at stake is the protection of the common good. The state should be neutral. It should not be indifferent, should not be hostile, and should not be identified with a religion. They should not make propaganda against religion. In the event that a religion, because of history, has special links with a nation, for example, the English word, the state could reserve a special support to that religion. But the other believers should not be discriminated, in particular if they are part of minority. If the state cannot decide on human rights, but simply recognize them, they cannot even decide about religious freedom. They can only take heed of the fact that a society is impregnated with religious principles. So the freedom of religion, in a sense, poses the problem of the role of religions in a society. Man is, by nature, religious. For those who study ethnology, the first tools and the rights are the sign that that man has appeared on the planet. The religion is not only referred to the future, it's an element, a constitutive element of the world of today. And it's one of the aberrations of the modern laicism, thinking that humanism can do without spirituality. A world without God is a dishumane world. Suffice it to think of the aberrations of the past century. Religion is an integral part of the expressions of the human beings. And they say the religious fact, any form it can take up. All religions help to understand how human beings have recognized God through the creation. Indeed, the Jewish Christian fact poses us in front of something which is completely different. It is not a simple cult, it's a testimony to an event which is history. It's God which enters in the history. Religions are a movement of human beings towards God. In the case of Christianity and Judaism, it is God who moves towards human beings. It's a revelation as clearly indicated in the wonderful message of Benedict XVI to the meeting. The freedom of religion concerns human beings, the concrete human beings, who, as a matter of fact, is a religious animal. it's pretty unique to note that if God is eliminated from the horizon of human beings look for other gods. There are too many gods. Atheism is no longer an issue. There are too many idols because we have forgotten God. As a matter of fact, the man asks two key questions at least once in life. The first is, does God exist? And the second, what is out there after death? So I think that every human being asks these questions. For those who find an answer, a second set of questions are there, which were listed by Kant as follows. What can I get to know? What am I supposed to do? What can I hope in? The right to existence of religious societies in a state is a fundamental right that the state has to respect in its own interest. Indeed, the different churches work for religion, and the citizens who practice a religion, they are indeed more prone to participate in the social and cultural life of their society. They are more cultured, they are more concerned about public society, and they are a resource for the state. So they do believe that humanity should improve its control on the creation so that they can set up a social, political, economic order in the interest of human beings so that they can develop their own dignity. It cannot then be denied that religions can offer a very important contribution. The Catholic Church in particular is in the van if we consider its very capillary work, and Comunione e Liberazione is an example of that. I'd like to conclude by stimulating you of Comunione e Liberazione who have the possibility to live your faith in Italy and outside, to appreciate your faith and to put it in practice. We Christians believe that man realizes his humanity when he receives God, when he is considered created by God, as the Pope stated, when he is aware of his dignity and he recognizes in that the seal of God who created us to his image, that human beings are great provided that they use their life to respond to the love of God and put it at the service of brothers and sisters. Yes, we are free to free many brothers and sisters who are enchained in many idols. We live in a world which is magnificent, but still full of grey areas. This world in which human beings explore the secrets of space, but is often blind on the meaning of his adventure. A world in which human beings can boost many technical successes, but they still question whether they will be able to control such discoveries. A world in which communication is getting faster and faster, but solitude is increasing. A world in which human solidarity is expressed every now and then, but not always, but where antagonism and wars create more violence than agreement. A world in publicity presents you with a better life, but life is not so much respected. This world is so contradictory, a world where human beings and women live who are loved by God. God did not betray his project of alliance, because God, who died and was resurrected, opens up a new life. And to the man of today, we propose not to be discovered as an image to God, but to discover that God is love. Yes, the man of today should discover that his dignity comes from another being. When a man is abandoned to the power of another man, when everything that he thinks is the measure of man, everything becomes dishumane. That's why we want to support the idea of an integral man with a fully human dimension, while at the same time fully transcendent. We want to keep open the door of hope, which is indeed the door of love, with which we allow other people to grow while growing ourselves. I think that in the world of today, this is our first duty. We should keep the door of hope open. The French poet Charles Péguy, when speaking about Christians, wrote, God made us as hope. This is the message that we offer to those who listen to us, to those who are in charge of societies, because, as de Tocqueville used to say to his fellow citizens who wanted sincerely to help human beings to be free, when these men attack religious opinions, they obey the dictates of their passions and not of their interests. Despotism may govern without fate, but liberty cannot. Thank you very much.
C'è ancora...
We still have a long way to go, as President Al-Nasser said, before we are able to acknowledge that there are many different religious and political identities, and to go beyond the idea that these differences are an obstacle, they are an asset. How can we continue along this journey? We can do that by playing our own role, like the hummingbird. But in order for us to do our role, that cannot be mandated by law. We need to have a fully human eye. We need to have an education to keep the doors of hope open, as Cardinal Tauran said. That's why we are here. That's why we have listened so willingly and with such participation and care the words of these three distinguished guests and friends. Thank you very much, and enjoy your evening.